Police dog Sniffs, something at an abandoned construction site. When they dig, they uncover a secret hidden for 5 years. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. The early morning in Willow Creek was cloaked in a thick fog, wrapping the unfinished buildings of the abandoned industrial district in a ghostly haze. The wind whistled through concrete structures and everything seemed frozen in an eerie stillness, until a piercing bark shattered the quiet. "Max, enough!" Officer Emily Harper ordered firmly, but the German Shepherd didn't listen. The dog, with dark fur and sharp, intelligent eyes, was frantically scratching at a patch of hard-packed dirt among the rubble. His breathing was heavy, as if he sensed something beyond instinct. Emily, still in her uniform and holding a flashlight, watched him closely. She knew Max better than she knew herself. He'd been her partner for 6 years, trained with military precision but bonded to her in a way that felt almost spiritual. Emily crouched beside him, shining her light on the exact spot where Max had stopped. The dirt was disturbed, but not by nature. It looked like someone had dug there and then tried to cover it up with debris. Emily's heart started pounding. Something deep inside told her that what she was about to uncover would change her life forever. "Let's see what's here, buddy," she whispered, grabbing a shovel from her truck. With each scoop of dirt, the tension grew. Max panted, watching her every move as if waiting for something. Finally, the shovel hit something solid, a rusty metal briefcase locked tight and caked in dry mud. Emily pulled it out with effort. It was heavier than it looked. Using a police tool to pry open the lock, she lifted the lid slowly. A stale, musty smell escaped. Inside, wrapped in vacuum-sealed plastic, were official documents: blueprints of buildings, aerial photos, transcripts of phone calls, and among them, an object stained with dried red, a police badge with the name Detective Ethan Carter. Emily stumbled back. Her hands shook. No, this can't be. It was the same Ethan who had vanished 5 years ago without a trace. Her former partner, her secret love, her deepest wound. Max stepped closer and rested his head on Emily's leg as if trying to comfort her. His eyes were filled with empathy and understanding. In that moment, they both knew that what they'd found was just the beginning. Emily's body camera recorded everything. She knew she'd have to report this to the department, but something inside urged her not to trust anyone. Not yet. She stayed kneeling beside the briefcase, the fog wrapping around them like a curtain of tragedy. "I promise we'll find out what happened to you, Ethan," she murmured, stroking Max's head. "I swear on everything I love." The night stayed quiet, but the calm was broken. The past had come back, and it came barking. The sun hadn't yet risen when Emily Harper pushed through the doors of the Willow Creek Police Department's Central Archive. Her face was hardened from a sleepless night, and her uniform was still smudged with dirt and dust she hadn't had time to brush off. At her side, Max walked silently, his eyes always alert as if danger could leap out from any corner. No one questioned her as she entered. Officer Harper wasn't one for small talk, but everyone knew her record: loyal, relentless, untouchable. And in her eyes that morning there was a different spark, a mix of pain, anger, and determination. She headed straight for the restricted section of the archive, where cold cases were stored. A heavy steel door demanded double clearance access. She swiped her badge and punched in her personal code. The system beeped sharply, and the door creaked open. "Come on, Max," she whispered, and the German Shepherd followed her inside. The archive smelled of old paper and dampness. Emily went directly to the section for unsolved cases. Her goal was clear: find the original file on Detective Ethan Carter's disappearance. When she pulled the folder marked with his name, her fingers trembled slightly. It had been 5 years since Ethan vanished without a clue. Back then, the case was quickly closed as voluntary desertion, but Emily never bought it. Not for a second. Opening the folder, a chill ran down her spine. Pages were missing. Witness statements, photos from the last place he was seen. Anything incriminating was gone. "They cleaned it out," she muttered, more to herself than to Max. "They erased everything." Suddenly, Max tensed. He growled low, his body rigid, ears perked. Emily spun around. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim hallway light. "You shouldn't be here, Emily," said the deep voice of Captain Robert Hayes, her direct superior, a man with a stern gaze, neatly combed grey hair, and an impeccable suit. Of Scottish descent, he was a symbol of order and discipline. "I have clearance to review any active or inactive case tied to new evidence, Captain," she replied, standing her ground. "That's not the issue," he said, stepping inside. "What you found, it needs to be handled carefully. There are people who don't want that story dug up again." Emily stared at him. Max let out a sharp bark, a clear warning. "Did you know they tampered with Ethan's case?" she asked, her voice defiant. Hayes studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then he closed the door behind him. "Don't ask questions that could get you killed," he said quietly. "Some things are better left buried, Emily." But a fire was already burning inside her. Emily had loved Ethan in secret, in the quiet moments between duty and the shadows of their badges. His disappearance had broken her, and now the truth was calling from a poorly dug grave. "I'm not stopping," she said, her voice cracking but steady. "If someone thinks they can silence me, they'll have to go through me. And Max." Hayes glanced at the dog, who stood protectively, ready for a fight. "Then God help you both." Without another word, he turned and vanished into the hallway, leaving a threat hanging in the air like floating knives. Emily knew she was stepping into a game with invisible rules, but she also knew she had the best partner by her side. Max nudged her hand with his nose. They weren't alone, they never had been. And so, among dusty files and broken memories, the biggest scandal in Willow Creek's history began to wake. The first rays of dawn were just creeping through the windows of the Internal Affairs office when Emily Harper arrived with determined steps, carrying the incomplete file and the weight of a truth still taking shape. Max, always at her side, stayed alert as they crossed the quiet hallways of the building. No one spoke. No one asked questions. It was as if the air itself knew something big was about to break. "I need to see Daniel Pierce," Emily said at the reception desk, cutting to the chase. The receptionist looked up, slightly confused. "The assistant prosecutor? Now?" "Now," Emily repeated, her tone sharp. Minutes later, Emily entered a small room on the second floor where Daniel Pierce waited. He was a man with a sharp face, a perfectly trimmed beard, and eyes as cold as ice with a faint British accent. Raised in privilege, he had a reputation for being untouchable. As far as anyone knew, he was one of the few allies Emily had left. "Officer Harper, what's with the early visit?" Daniel asked, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. Without a word, Emily set the metal briefcase on the table. Max sat beside her, watching every move Daniel made, as if he could smell the intentions beneath his skin. Daniel opened the briefcase hesitantly. When he saw the contents, his expression changed. He carefully pulled out the documents and Ethan Carter's blood-stained badge. He stayed silent for too long. "This is impossible," he muttered finally. "This was all supposed to be destroyed." Emily narrowed her eyes. "You knew about this, Daniel." The man swallowed hard. Tension filled the room like a storm about to break. I was in charge of filing the case, but I never saw this evidence. They told me the file was closed, that Carter had deserted, that it wasn't worth digging into the past." Max let out a low growl. Daniel glanced at him, uneasy. "That's not what you told me 5 years ago," Emily accused, her voice breaking. "You were the one who convinced me to let it go, to stop asking questions. I trusted you. I was trying to protect you," Daniel shouted, losing his composure for a moment. "There were people watching you, Emily. Powerful people. If you'd gotten too close, you'd have ended up like him." Emily froze, processing every word. Max shifted slightly forward, ready to defend her if needed. Daniel lowered his voice, almost pleading. "Don't hate me for what I did. For what I had to do, I'm not your enemy." "Then help me," she demanded. "I need access to every file linked to Horizon Construction. Ethan was investigating them before he disappeared. Those contracts, and they were a front." Daniel hesitated. He looked at the documents. He looked at Emily. And finally, he nodded. "You'll get what you need. But promise me you'll be careful. You're walking into a maze that swallowed plenty of people." "I'm not alone," she said, petting Max's head. "I never was." She left the office without looking back, certain she'd crossed a point of no return. Outside, the wind blew hard. Things were about to explode. The only way was forward, into the darkness. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when Emily parked her truck outside an old warehouse, now used by the prosecutor's office as a storage site for outdated physical files. At that hour, Willow Creek was asleep, or pretending to be. The fog was thick, as if the air itself was trying to hide what was about to be revealed. Max jumped out of the truck first, his paws steady on the wet pavement. He sniffed the air and let out a faint growl. His body was tense, every muscle ready. Emily followed, holding a flashlight in one hand and a set of keys in the other. The warehouse's side door opened with a metallic groan, breaking the silence. Inside, the smell of old paper and dampness was almost unbearable. The place was packed with rusty shelves, stacks of unorganized boxes, and cobwebs hanging like curtains. It was the perfect place to bury secrets. Daniel had kept his promise. A sealed envelope with the Department of Public Works stamp waited on a rusty table, along with a set of security keys. Inside the envelope was a list of names, awarded contracts, international bank accounts, and one word highlighted in red, Horizon. Emily flipped through the pages one by one until she stopped cold. No, it can't be him. The document showed that one of Horizon Construction's main investors was Judge William Foster, a retired federal judge, Ethan Carter's mentor, and Emily's stepfather. Her hands started to shake. Max moved closer, sniffing the paper as if he could sense the truth printed on it. His eyes locked onto Emily with an intensity that cut to her core. She didn't want to believe it. William had been a towering figure in her life since she was 13, when her mother married him after being widowed. She always found him cold, calculating, but she never imagined he was tied to something this dirty. Ethan, you knew this. That's why you disappeared. You got too close. Max barked once, short, sharp, like he was agreeing. Emily felt the world spin beneath her. Now she understood why so much effort went into silencing the case, why so many doors were locked and files went missing. It was personal. Her own blood was tainted with lies. Just then, a metallic clank from behind a shelf caught Max's attention. The dog bolted without hesitation, darting between the shelves, and a muffled yell followed. "Back!" Emily shouted, drawing her gun. A man hit the floor, struggling as Max pinned him with surgical precision. Emily rushed over, shining her light on his face. It was James Larson, a former Horizon construction clerk, declared dead in an accident 2 years ago. "Please, don't turn me in. I know things. I know who killed Ethan. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution ordered from the top." Emily's eyes burned. "Who gave the order?" James looked at her, pale and sweating. It was Foster, your stepfather." Emily stepped back. Max growled low, steady, keeping the man under control. The truth was a venomous snake, and it had just bitten her full force. James Larson's face was still drenched in sweat as Emily shoved him against the warehouse wall. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with barely contained rage. "Say it again," she demanded, aiming her flashlight at his face. "It was William Foster. He greenlit everything. Ethan was about to turn him in. He had proof. And then he was gone. I saw them take him. I saw them beat him, load him into a black van with no plates. He never came back." Max growled softly, standing among the rubble, listening to every word. His raised fur signaled something dark was closing in, as if the air itself grew heavier by the second. "Why'd you fake your death?" Emily asked, her jaw tight. "Because it was the only way to stay alive. I knew too much. They used me to forge bids, launder money, tamper with evidence. I was just a pawn. But when I heard they'd silenced Ethan, I knew I'd be next." James collapsed to his knees, exhausted, his hands covering his face. Emily's breathing was heavy. The image of her stepfather, imposing and cold, flashed through her mind like a shadow that never stopped chasing her. Ethan had been warned, and still, he pressed on, because he believed the truth was worth more than his life. "Where'd they take him? Where's the body?" she asked, her voice a mix of anger and helplessness. James swallowed hard, trembling. "The old stone quarry south near the dry riverbed. That's where they buried everything they wanted the world to forget." Max barked once, loud, like he was marking their next move. Emily stood up. Her eyes burned with resolve. She glared at James with contempt. "You're staying here. Try to run and he'll find you," she said, pointing at Max, who watched him with an unsettling intelligence. They left the warehouse without another word. The sky was turning red over Willow Creek. Emily knew that before the sun hit the horizon, she'd either find hell or the peace Ethan never had. The truck rattled along the dirt road. Max kept his head out the window, sniffing the air as if guiding the way. With every mile closer to the quarry, the silence grew deeper. Even the birds didn't dare sing there. The land was dry, barren, covered in dust and jagged rocks. Old, rusted machinery stood like skeletons of an industry long dead. It was the perfect place to make something or someone disappear. Emily stepped out of the truck with a shovel in hand. Max ran ahead, driven by a fierce instinct, and started digging in one spot with almost mystical precision. "Ethan, if you're here, I swear I won't let your death be for nothing," Emily murmured, her eyes welling up. After a few minutes, the dirt gave way. The shovel hit something hard, a metal box. Emily unearthed it with shaking hands. Max stepped back, respectful, as if he felt the weight of the moment. Inside the box were human remains, and among the bones, a chain with a medallion, Ethan's medallion. Emily dropped to her knees. I found you, Ethan." She wept silently as the wind blew hard over the dry land, carrying away the lies of the past. The first light of dawn was just breaking over the horizon when Emily returned to her truck. Ethan's remains reported to the coroner. The air was heavy, thick, as if the earth itself were mourning. Max climbed into the back seat, but he didn't lie down like usual. He sat upright, restless, his ears perked, as if he knew something was about to shatter, and he was right. As Emily started the engine, she caught something odd in the rearview mirror. A flash, then the muffled crack of a gunshot. The back window shattered. Max barked furiously as Emily floored the gas. "They're following us," she shouted, swerving the wheel to veer off the main road. Behind her, a black SUV sped up, its headlights off, moving like a silent predator. Shots kept coming, echoing through the trees, but Emily knew this terrain better than anyone. She cut through hunting trails, the engine roaring, her heart pounding. Max in the back alternated between barking and trying to climb through the broken window. He knew they were in real danger. When she finally reached an isolated cabin in the woods, a rundown hideout Ethan used during sensitive investigations, Emily slammed on the brakes and ran inside with Max. She locked the doors, killed the lights. All she could hear was her own breathing and the sound of Max pacing the perimeter with military precision. She pulled out her phone. No signal, of course. Then, in the darkest corner of the room, she found something unexpected. A tape recorder hidden under the floorboards, along with a stack of tapes. Ethan had left something big, something that might bring down the entire empire behind Horizon Construction. She played the first tape. "If you're hearing this, it's because I'm dead." Ethan's voice, broken, pained, but steady. "I followed the money, Emily. It all leads to the same place. William Foster. He's not working alone. There's a tight circle. Judges, retired colonels, European bankers, even Midland Parliament members, all neck-deep in human trafficking, using Horizon as a front." Emily covered her mouth, stunned. Max sat beside her, still, as if he were listening too. "They won't believe me. They'll take me out. But you can do it. You and Max. You're the only hope." Tears streamed down Emily's face. "How did you expect me to live with this, Ethan? How?" Max rested his head on her leg. In that gesture, Emily found strength. The sound of tires screeching outside snapped her out of her trance. Pounding on the door, men's voices, radios. "Police! Open up now!" But Emily wasn't naive. She knew those uniforms weren't real. They weren't here to protect her. They were here to silence her. She opened a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf, pulled out a sniper rifle and clipped a small body camera to Max's collar. Then she whispered in his ear, "Fine, Daniel. Record everything. Do it for Ethan, do it for us." Max looked at her one last time and slipped out the window, vanishing into the brush like a ghost. Emily barricaded herself. Outside, hell was about to break loose. Night had fallen over Willow Creek like a shroud. Deep in the woods, as the fake cops surrounded the cabin, Max raced through trees and shadows, leaping over ravines and weaving through thickets without looking back. His breathing was steady, his paws swift. The camera on his collar carried more than footage. It carried a mission. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, Emily heard the front door splinter under a crowbar. The first shot exploded against the wall near her head. Hidden behind a flipped table, she returned fire with precision. The sound of gunfire bounced off the wooden walls. "Dead or alive, we don't care," a man's voice shouted from outside. Emily reloaded her rifle. She wasn't afraid. She was ready to die if she had to, but not without taking a few of them with her. She knew Max would do his job. She knew Daniel Pierce, who she'd doubted for so long, might be her last hope. Max emerged hours later, covered in dust and mud, at the doors of the administrative building where Daniel worked. The prosecutor was gone, but Max, guided by his uncanny sense of smell, followed his trail to an apartment on the city's outskirts. Daniel opened the door, startled by the sound of Max's nose banging against the wood. "Max, what? Where's Emily?" The dog rushed inside, stood in front of him, and sat, tilting his neck. Daniel noticed the small camera clipped to the collar. With shaking hands, he downloaded the footage onto his laptop. The images were clear: voices, gunshots, the faces of the attackers, and most importantly, the audio from Ethan's tape. Daniel froze. My God, this is enough to bring down half the country. The next morning, a raid led by the prosecutor's office, backed by military escorts, surrounded the cabin, but it was too late. The imposters had slipped away before dawn. Inside, they found bloodstains, spent shells, and Emily's body camera. No sign of her. Daniel watched the footage. Every second, every bullet, every word. "She knew she wouldn't make it out," he whispered. That afternoon, he called a national press conference. Standing before dozens of cameras and microphones, pale but resolute, he revealed the evidence gathered by Emily and Ethan. "What you're about to see is a betrayal that eats away at the foundations of our justice system," he said firmly. "These images were captured by an officer now presumed missing, a woman who risked her life for the truth and for a better country." The faces of the guilty flashed across screens. William Foster, General Harold Mason, Judge Edward Larson, and other big names. All connected, all guilty. The country reeled. Meanwhile, in an unknown place behind cold concrete walls, Emily slowly opened her eyes. She was bound, battered, but alive. In front of her, a familiar figure. "Hello, Emily," said William Foster with an icy smile. "I always knew you'd go too far." She didn't answer. She just stared, her eyes burning with the fury and promise of someone who hadn't given up. And somewhere else in the world, a German shepherd named Max was honored with medals, his eyes scanning the horizon, waiting for the moment to find her again. The air in the cell was thick, heavy like burnt oil. The windowless concrete walls swallowed the faint light of a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. Emily Harper, with split lips, a cut above her eye, and swollen wrists from her restraints, breathed slowly. Every second was a silent battle, but there was no surrender in her eyes. Across from her, William Foster watched with the same emotionless face that had loomed over her childhood. He no longer wore a judge's robe or expensive suits. Now, he was just a man, stripped of power, teetering on the edge of ruin. "You don't understand, Emily," he said, his voice tired. "What we did, it was necessary. Order, control, safety. Without us, this country would collapse in a week. Don't try to sell me your poison wrapped in silk, William," she spat. "You killed Ethan. You tried to kill me. You used kids' human lives like bargaining chips. That's not order, that's rot." Foster stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, muttering, "The truth has never been enough to save anyone. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me." Miles away, in a secret military base set up by the prosecutor's office, Daniel Pierce was wrapping up the biggest covert operation in the country's history. With public outrage and international pressure behind him after the evidence went public, he had the green light to take down every name on Ethan's list. But his eyes weren't on the monitors. They were on the concrete cell where he believed Emily might be held. And then a sign. Max, the German shepherd, tireless, guided by traces no human could detect, reached the ruins of an old industrial site. He sniffed, stopped, barked. Daniel, with an elite team, followed his every step. There was no resistance. The mercenaries had fled, but inside they found the impossible. Emily, alive, unconscious, tied to an iron frame, bearing signs of torture and deprivation. "Emily!" Daniel shouted, rushing to her. Max got there first. He approached slowly, gently licking her face, and with that touch Emily woke. "Max," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "You did it." The arrests came like a cascade. William Foster was captured that same night at his countryside estate, without bodyguards. He had no one left to call. Other high-ranking officials fell like dominoes. bank accounts frozen, mansions emptied, security teams turning on their bosses. The streets of Willow Creek filled with cheers, tears, and signs, bearing a name that was no longer just a dog's. Max became a symbol of loyalty, of true justice. His image in a tactical vest flashed across news broadcasts continent-wide. Emily was hospitalized for weeks. She needed surgeries, intensive care, and rehab, but in the end she walked again. At her first public appearance, fully recovered, she was clear. Justice isn't a concept, it's an action, one you defend with your last breath. Max stood beside her, a medal hanging from his neck, his eyes locked on her as if he understood every word. In the credits of this true story, two graves rest beneath a massive oak, Ethan Carter's and Sarah Brooks, who was found dead weeks earlier, killed for betraying the network from within. Emily, now leading a new intelligence unit, visits that spot every month. She brings flowers, speaks softly, and Max, as always, waits in silence. The fight isn't over, but the truth, it has a voice now, and its name is justice. A year has passed since that endless night when the truth broke the chains of corruption that had ruled Willow Creek's underbelly for decades. The city, though still scarred, breathes differently. Shadows still lurk, as they always will, but now there are eyes watching, hearts that won't stay silent. Daniel Pierce was named Attorney General. Under his leadership, sweeping judicial reforms were enacted, shattering the silence of complicit institutions and dismantling the last cells of the human trafficking network. In interviews, he never takes credit. He always mentions two names, Emily Harper and Max. Emily recovered fully. Her physical scars became memories, the emotional ones, invisible tattoos she wears with pride. She now leads the Special Tactical Investigation Unit, an autonomous arm of national security, made up of incorruptible agents trained not just to fight crime, but to expose the truth, even when it destroys the powerful. She and Max are still partners, inseparable. Max, for his part, became the first police dog to receive the Golden Honor Justice Medal, a recognition given only to those who save lives in high-risk operations. His image became a mural. Kids learn his name in schools. He became a symbol of unwavering loyalty. But to Emily, he's still just my Max. The Foster family lost everything. William was sentenced to life without parole. His final words at the trial were spoken without remorse. I did what was necessary, and I'd do it again. Emily wasn't at the sentencing, not out of weakness but by choice. She was on a mission, dismantling a money-laundering hub tied to the Old Horizon network on Midland's border. She knew Foster's real punishment was living forgotten, powerless, voiceless. And what about Ethan Carter? His memory was restored, his name cleared. He received posthumous honors, and his story was told in documentaries, books, and lectures. But Emily did something more personal. At the memorial where his remains rest under a sturdy tree, she had a small bronze statue placed. It's of Max, the German shepherd, sitting, gazing at the horizon. Like that day he dug through the rubble and unearthed the truth. Willow Creek still fights. Corruption, like a weed, tries to creep back. But now there are watchful eyes, steady hands, and a dog with a sharp nose still patrolling the halls of duty, ready to run, bark, and protect. Because as long as silence tries to cover lies, there will always be someone, human or not, ready to break it. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.